Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to give you some tips on how not to get distracted in Mass. Now before we begin, let's start with the prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri Filio et Spiritui Sancto, secutora in principio, et nunc et semper, et saecula saeculorum. Amen. We have a lot of episodes here on the Mass and some problems with the typical Mass in America and some solutions on how to possibly make our Masses better. Of course, this is a universal statement because many of you do go to parishes where the Masses are exemplary and some of you go to the opposite. Now I would tell you most of these tips can be applicable to any type of Mass. Look, we are human and it is normal for our mind to wander in Mass. You don't want to be scrupulous and to think that you need to be completely focused on every word uttered by the priest or the lector throughout the entire hour, hour and a half Mass. That's just not the way we are wired. That being said, we do want to be focused on the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and we want to be present as we can be. So here are some tips that I would give you. And a lot of these are just not really revelatory. A lot of them are common sense, but still, it's good to mention them. And please post in the comments other tips that you would give. Number one is sit up front. I mean, this is human nature. You know, I think it was in Liturgical Abuses That Drive Me Crazy Part 2 where I talk about the church architecture that's kind of in the fad. I think it's faded more in the last 10 years where you put the altar in the middle of the sanctuary. And so human nature is we're going to be looking past the altar at other people. And so it's kind of the same problem when you're sitting further back, in that there's going to be more people in front of you that are going to distract you. Sometimes you're just looking at them. Sometimes you might be checking people out. Sometimes they might have kids that are distracting you. So obviously, sit as close as you can. Sit as close as you can. And I would say that if you have children, the children are more likely to behave. I'm not saying necessarily infants or toddlers, but the children will be more likely to behave if they're up front because they can see the action, but also they're less distracted too. So I would tell you to sit as close as you possibly can. Another thing is, don't take your phone in. Leave it in the car. Oh, but Gregory, someone's going to break in. Probably not. You might just have some phone dependence. Leave it in the car. Because sure, you'll hear the announcement before Mass, please put your phone on silent. But look, let's be real. If the phone is there, and especially the younger generations, Gen Zers and millennials almost see the phone as like another organ, you're going to be more distracted, right? Fear of missing out. Am I getting a message? You might even look at your phone, and look, I've done this during Mass. So I am not judging you. You might be looking at your phone. You might actually be scrolling through your phone. You might be doing who knows what, but at the least, even if you're not looking at it, you're wondering, what am I missing? What's going on? And so forth. So a better thing to do is just leave the phone in the car. You're not likely going to have an emergency. The chances are, your kid isn't going to be sick during that hour because your kid's probably going to be with you, but whatever you think is an emergency is likely not going to occur during that time. So I would just tell you to leave the phone in the car. Number 3, this can be dependent on the Mass you're going to. If the music is not necessarily to your liking and you find it to be distracting and taking you out of the Mass, that's unfortunate. And I would say that, as Father McTeague likes to say, and I was interviewed by him on his Catholic Current show, but I was probably interviewed like a year ago, but he likes the phrase Our Lady of Suburbia. So if you go to our typical Our Lady of Suburbia parish, the music is going to be, like I like to call, pop folk 1970s, acoustic guitar, or maybe you'll get the piano, you'll get this typical kind of stuff, and it's not necessarily lending to what most people would say would be something transcendental, something sublime, which would be more of the Gregorian chants, which would be more of the music that is going to be more uplifting. So if you find that you go to a parish where the music's like that, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating because you could talk to the liturgical director, but the liturgical directors are exceedingly stubborn. So you're probably just going to have to find a different parish. I know when I was younger, it would almost drive me apoplectic to go to a Mass where the music was so bad. and it would just take me out of it. But it was more about me, because I would get very kind of, I would say, Pharisaic in retrospect, that I would get so frustrated that the music was so bad. Same thing for like extraordinary ministers not dressing up, lectors not dressing up, things like that. If you find that to be distracting and taking you out of the moment, I would first tell you in charity, because I was this way too, just take a step back and be like, look, it's not in your control. Let's try not to be judgmental. And look, just go to another parish where you don't have to deal with that. Go to a parish where they don't allow extraordinary ministers. So that's typically going to be ordinary at a Chair of St. Peter or some sort of traditional Latin Mass. Go to those services, because you can definitely stay more present and be more in the moment. And that's where you want to be. So guys, these are just some tips. And look, there's other tips. But in closing, try to stay focused what's going on. I think it's great, especially during the readings. The Eucharistic prayer, my opinion of the Eucharistic prayer is, in the Latin Mass, you don't hear any of it being uttered. Right? The priest utters it, he's ad orientem, you don't even hear it. And so a lot of those prayers, in my humble opinion, you don't even need to hear. In the Novus Ordo Mass, of course, we hear it. So if there is a time that you have to get a little distracted, I would tell you maybe it's during the Eucharistic prayer. Not to say that it's not important to hear it, but maybe that's one of those places. But I would definitely pay attention during the homily, and that can be hard because the homilies can be pretty bad. We have an episode on how to improve homiletics. Listen to the homily, listen to the readings. And the other thing is, another thing that can distract you, which takes you out of the Mass, is the peace offering. Now, I've been to different services, like the TLM, for example, that don't even have a peace offering where you can go around. But that can certainly take you out of the Mass. I go to the ordinary, the Chair of St. Peter, in their peace offering, there's nothing that the congregation does at all. But in many parishes, you will see the 5 minute, no, it's hyperbolic. You would see like the 1 minute prior to COVID, everybody's shaking everybody's hand. Some people going across the aisle, shaking their hands. Now post-COVID, I love it, because I'm not a germaphobe at all, but I love it how people just do this. And it has cut down on the 1 minute of saying hi to everybody and hugging everybody. So I think that's good. But that's another thing that can be very distracting, certainly. And you shouldn't feel obligated to shake anybody's hand. When people do it, like in the daily Mass I go to, I just kind of nod and smile. But if that's another thing that bothers you, sit in the front row. Because if you sit in the front row, you don't have to turn around if you don't want to, and you can stay focused. So look, in the typical American parish, I would say parish Mass, there can be a lot of distractions. If you're one of those people who just finds the aforementioned distracting, then I would just go to a Mass that limits, if not eliminates, a lot of the foregoing, and that way you can be more focused. And most of you live in a large city, relatively large city, you can find these services. Guys, post in the comments what distracts you in a Mass and how do you alleviate it. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.